You have to leave. This is my house. I have the deed right here. I legally bought it.
This is my house now. I'm the caretaker. The Homeowners Association knows I'm here. In fact, I run the HOA, so I suggest you get off my porch before I call the sheriff for trespassing.
So, you're probably wondering how I ended up here. How I bought my dream house, a beautiful abandoned place up in the mountains, only to be told I was trespassing on my own property by the president of the HOA who was living inside it. It's a story so absurd, so packed with gaslighting and corruption, you might not believe it's real. But I've got the documents, I've got the footage, and I've definitely got the legal bills to prove it. It all started 3 months ago, when I thought my lifelong dream had finally come true. Ever since I can remember, I've wanted a place in the mountains. Not some sterile modern cabin, but a house with soul, with history. A place to escape the city, breathe in that pine-scented air, and work with my hands to bring something old back to life. For years, I scrolled through listings, hunting for that perfect mix of potential and neglect. I didn't just want a house. I wanted a project. I wanted a story. I spent my weekends driving down winding mountain roads, searching for sale by owner signs on properties that looked like they'd been forgotten by time. I spoke with realtors who specialized in rural areas. Still, everything was either a total teardown or a polished-up cabin with zero character. I was starting to think my dream was just that, a dream, and then I found it. Not through a realtor, but on a county auction website. The listing was stark. Residential property tax lien sale. The photos were grainy, taken on a gray day. They showed a 2-story house in dark wood, with a wide porch wrapping around one side, perched on a slope and surrounded by massive oak and pine trees. A few windows were boarded up and the paint was peeling, but I could see the bones of a beautiful home under all that decay. The description was short. The property had belonged to a couple, the Hendersons, who passed away a few years back with no heirs. The taxes went unpaid, and now the county was seizing the property to recover its money. It was listed as abandoned. My heart started pounding. This was it. This was the one. The following weekend, I drove the 2 hours up to see it for myself. The community was a web of winding roads and secluded lots, all governed by a homeowners association. I found the house at the end of a long gravel driveway. It was even better and worse than the pictures. The setting was breathtaking. A creek ran along the property line, and the view from the porch stretched out over a valley that seemed to go on forever. But the house itself was in rough shape. The porch steps were soft, a railing was broken, and wild vines were crawling up the stone chimney. It was perfect. The following 2 weeks were a mad dash of due diligence. This is the tedious but absolutely critical step in buying any property, especially an abandoned one from an auction. I hired a title company to conduct a full search to ensure there were no other liens, no hidden mortgages, and no long-lost relatives who could suddenly appear and claim the house. The title search came back clean. The only debt was the back taxes, which the auction price would clear. I was the only claimant. I looked into the HOA. Their website was basic and a little outdated. I downloaded the covenants and restrictions. They were standard, rules about new construction, property maintenance, and not leaving trash out for bears. Nothing seemed crazy. There was a list of board members with Malene, president, at the top. It was just a name on a website. It meant nothing to me. Auction day was a nightmare. It was all online. I sat at my kitchen table, just watching the timer tick down. My first bid was the minimum, just enough to cover the back taxes. For a while, nothing. I can get it for a steal. Then, in the last 10 minutes, another bidder showed up. My heart sank. We went back and forth, the price climbing higher and higher. I had a hard number in my head, my absolute maximum, and we were getting dangerously close. With 30 seconds left, they placed another bid, just $1,000 under my max. My hands were literally shaking. This was my one shot. I typed in my final number, hit confirm, and held my breath. The timer hit 0. Winning bidder, the screen flashed. I had won. I couldn't believe it. I was a homeowner. The dream was absolute. The closing was all handled remotely. Papers were signed, funds were transferred, On 15th of March 2025, the deed was officially recorded in my name. I owned it. Free and clear. I had the stamped documents to prove it. I took the next day off work, grabbed the new keys my lawyer sent, and drove up to the mountains, my mind racing with plans. I was thinking about staining the deck, which walls to knock down, and where to plant a garden. I was picturing holidays with family, quiet mornings with coffee on that porch. I was filled with pure, absolute joy. That joy lasted for precisely 2 hours. Because when I pulled up to my new house, my dream house, the house that was legally mine and listed as abandoned for years, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a light on in one of the windows. My first thought was, I must be wrong. It could be a reflection. Maybe my mind's playing tricks on me. I parked at the bottom of the driveway and just stared, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nope. It was definitely a light. A warm, yellow glow is coming from the living room. Then I saw the second sign, a little wisp of smoke curling out of the stone chimney. Someone was in my house. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, drive away, and call the police. But this was my house. I had the deed in a folder right there on the passenger seat. I wasn't going to be scared off my own property. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and started walking up the driveway, my boots crunching loudly in the creepy silence of the woods. As I got closer, the signs of life got clearer and more infuriating. There was a satellite dish on the roof that was not included in the auction photos. There were potted plants on the porch, green and very much alive. A welcome mat sat in front of the door, which read, "Home Sweet Home." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I stepped onto the porch. My hand was trembling a little as I reached for the door. Before I could even knock, it swung open. A woman stood there, probably in her late 50s, with a severe haircut and eyes that were already narrowed with suspicion. She was wearing a fleece vest and holding a steaming mug. This was Malene, though I didn't know it yet. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with annoyance, like I was trying to sell her something. I was so stunned I could barely get the words out. Yes, I'm the new owner of this house." She let out a short, sharp laugh. It was not a friendly sound. "I'm sorry, you must be mistaken. This house isn't for sale. Now, if you'll excuse me." She started to close the door. Panic and adrenaline hit me all at once. I put my hand up to stop the door. "No, wait. I'm not mistaken. I bought this at a county auction. I have the deed. I closed yesterday." She stared at my hand on my door, and then her eyes snapped back to my face. The annoyance had turned into something colder. "I don't know what fantasy world you're living in, but I've been here for almost 2 years. This is my home. You need to leave. This is where the shaky phone footage you saw at the beginning comes in." My mind was just reeling. Was this a scam? Did I buy a house that wasn't actually for sale? I fumbled for my phone. "I'm going to record this," I said, my voice shaking. "I am the legal owner." I pulled up the digital copy of the deed and held it out. "Look, right here. Recorded with the county yesterday." She didn't even look at it. "That little piece of paper doesn't mean anything," she said, her voice full of condescending pity. "I am the official caretaker of this property, appointed by the Homeowners Association. The HOA knows I'm here. In fact," she added with a smug little smile, "I run the HOA. I'm the president." The world just tilted. The HOA president. The name from the website, Malene. This woman, this squatter, was the head of the very organization meant to enforce the rules. It made 0 sense. "You're the HOA president?" I asked, completely bewildered. "Then you should know this property was sold. It was a legal tax sale. The HOA should have been notified." "The HOA is fully aware," she said coolly. "We decided it's in the community's best interest that I stay here to make sure the property doesn't fall into disrepair. But it's my property now." I almost shouted, my frustration boiling over. "You can't just decide to live in a house you don't own. You're trespassing!" And that's when she said the line I will never forget. "This is my house now," she said, her voice dropping low. "And as the HOA president, I'm telling you that you are trespassing on community-managed property. I suggest you get off my porch before I call the sheriff." She slammed the door in my face. I just stood there in total shock. The lock clicked. I was locked out of my own home by a squatter who was using her HOA job as a shield. My first call was to the sheriff. I explained everything, my voice still trembling. I bought a house. I have the deed. There's a woman inside who won't leave. The dispatcher sounded bored. Is she threatening you, sir? Well, she threatened to call the cops on me for trespassing on my own land. But she didn't physically harm you? Sir, this sounds like a civil matter. If she's been living there, she may have established residency. You'll probably have to take her to court to evict her. A civil matter. I had a legally stamped document from the county stating that the land in question was mine. And this woman, with no lease, no title, no right to be there, had more power than I did. The law that was supposed to protect me was now protecting her. This is the nightmare of squatters' rights. In many places, once someone has been in a property for a while, even if they are there illegally, it is not possible to kick them out. You must go through a formal, expensive, and lengthy eviction process. You must sue someone to reclaim your own property. I was defeated. I got back in my car and just sat there for an hour, staring at the house, at that light in the window. My dream had become a nightmare. I had sunk my life savings into this place, and I couldn't even step inside. And the person keeping me out was the one person supposed to be enforcing the rules. It felt like a conspiracy. That night, I went home and started digging. I spent hours online scouring the HOA's public documents. And that's when I found it, the smoking gun, buried in the HOA board's meeting minutes. The meeting took place on 16th of March, 2025. The day after, I legally closed on the house. The minutes read, "The board has approved Malene to continue her role as caretaker for the abandoned Henderson property. A monthly subsidy of $800 will be allocated to her for utilities and maintenance, effective immediately." I felt the blood drain from my face. Not only was she living in my house, but the HOA, her own board, had just voted to pay her to do it. Using HOA funds, my funds, now that I am a member. They were paying my squatter a salary to live in my house, and they passed the vote the day after I became the legal owner. This wasn't just a squatter. This was coordinated. She had used her power to build a legal shield around herself. Let's break down the math. She admitted she'd been there for almost 2 years. That subsidy had likely already cost the HOA over $19,000. Money that was supposed to be used for plowing roads and maintaining common areas. Instead, it was going right into the president's pocket to fund her illegal occupation of a house she didn't own. I felt sick. This was far bigger and uglier than I had ever imagined. What would you have done when the system that's supposed to protect property rights is being twisted against you? I knew then that this wouldn't be a simple conversation. This was going to be a war. The next morning, I woke up with a cold, hard knot of anger in my stomach. The shock was gone, replaced by resolve. This woman, Malene, and her cronies on the HOA board had picked a fight with the wrong person. I was not going to let them steal my dream. First step, find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a shark. I needed someone who specialized in real estate law, specifically fighting corrupt HOAs. After 2 days of frantic calls, I found him. Mr. Davies, a grizzled, no-nonsense attorney who genuinely enjoyed suing homeowner associations. When I explained the situation, there was a long pause on the other end of the phone. Then he let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, "that's a new one. I've seen some brazen moves, but paying the president to squat in a house she doesn't own? That's next level." He took my case. Mr. Davies' strategy was aggressive. "We don't just go after the squatter," he told me. "We go after the entire institution that's enabling her. First, we put everyone on notice." Mr. Davies drafted 2 letters. The first was a formal notice to quit for Malene. It's the first legal step in any eviction, telling her she had 10 days to vacate voluntarily. The second letter was a 10-page masterpiece sent to the entire HOA board. It was a cease and desist that laid out Malene's illegal occupation, the board's complicity, and the fraudulent use of HOA funds. It cited the state laws they were breaking and detailed the motion they passed to pay her after the property was legally mine. We demanded that they stop all payments, retract the caretaker agreement, and assist in removing her. We attached copies of my deed, the county records, and their own meeting minutes. They had 15 days to comply before we filed a lawsuit against each board member personally. We sent both letters via certified mail. The 10-day wait for Malene's response was agonizing. Every day I hoped for a call saying she'd packed her bags. Of course, that didn't happen. The deadline came and went. Silence. She was digging in. The HOA board, however, responded through their lawyer. The letter was arrogant and dismissive. It claimed the board acted in good faith to protect an abandoned property. It blamed me for buying the house. It stated that they'd continue to support Malene until a court ordered them to stop. They were calling our bluff. Good, Mr. Davies said. Arrogant people make mistakes. So we filed the lawsuit and eviction action against Malene. We filed a separate, much larger lawsuit against the HOA and its 5 board members for damages, my legal fees, and punitive damages due to their negligence. We were making it personal. While the legal wheels were slowly turning, I decided to do some investigating myself. The next HOA meeting was in a month. It was open to all homeowners, and now I was one of them. I was going to confront them in public. I spent the weeks leading up to it, making copies of everything, my deed, the HOA meeting minutes, the dismissive letter from their lawyer. I was going to hand them out to everyone. The night of the meeting, my stomach was in knots. I walked into the community clubhouse, and it felt like a lion's den. There, at the head of a table, sat Malene, looking smug. The other board members sat beside her, looking nervous. I waded through the treasurer's report and the landscaping update. Then they got to new business. I stood up. My name is Creator's name, I started, my voice way steadier than I expected. I'm the legal owner of 124 Pine Ridge Road, and I have a question for the board. A murmur went through the room. Malene's face went pale. She recognized me. My question is, I continued, looking right at her, can you please explain to the homeowners here why the board voted, the day after I bought my home, to use our HOA dues to pay your president, Malene? $800 a month to squat in it illegally? Chaos. People started talking all at once. Malene banged a gavel. This is not the proper forum, she shouted. You are out of order. I'm not out of order, I shot back. I'm a homeowner asking why our money is funding a criminal act. I have the documents right here for anyone who wants to see. I started handing out my packets. People grabbed them, their eyes wide as they read. One terrified-looking board member stammered, it was to protect the property. Protect it from what? I asked him. From its legal owner? You enabled a thief with your neighbor's money. Did any of you, I said to the room, know that over $19,000 of your dues have been paid to Malene to live rent-free in a house she has no claim to? There was a gasp. The other homeowners were now glaring at the board. An older man stood up. Is this true, Malene? Have you been taking our money? She just sat there, her face a mask of fury. She couldn't deny it. It was right there, in her own meeting minutes. She was exposed. The meeting fell apart into a shouting match. Malene, seeing she'd lost control, abruptly adjourned the meeting and practically ran out of the room. It was a small victory, but it was crucial. I had turned her own community against her. This whole thing has been an absolute nightmare. But seeing the look on her face when she was exposed, that was a turning point. The fight was far from over, but the tide was turning. The public humiliation put massive pressure on the board. Malene still refused to budge, but the lawsuits were crawling forward. A court date for the eviction was set, but it was still 2 months away. 2 more months of me paying a mortgage on a house I couldn't use. The pressure worked. 2 board members resigned. The HOA's lawyer was now in damage control, trying to negotiate. They offered to cover my legal fees if I would drop the suit against the individual members. Mr. Davies and I refused. We wanted them to formally evict her, issue a public apology, and open their books for a full audit. We were squeezing them. Finally, our day in court for the eviction arrived. It was almost anticlimactic. Malene arrived with her lawyer, who was paid for by the HOA's insurance policy. Her lawyer tried to argue she was a tenant at will. The judge was not impressed. He looked at my deed, at the lack of any lease, and at the date on the HOA's motion to pay her. Let me get this straight, the judge said, looking over his glasses. Your client is the president of an HOA. She's been living in a property without a lease. The property is sold, and the day after the sale, her board, which she controls, votes to pay her with community funds to continue living there. And you want me to believe she's anything other than a trespasser abusing her position? Her lawyer had nothing to say. The judge ruled in my favor. He signed the eviction order. Malene was legally ordered to vacate my property within 72 hours. If she didn't, the sheriff would forcibly remove her. I walked out of that courtroom feeling a relief so profound it almost brought me to my knees. It was over. I had won. The 72 hours passed. I half expected her to barricade herself inside, but even Malene wasn't going to take on the sheriff's department. On the third day, a neighbor who'd become an ally called me. "She's leaving," he said. "There's a moving truck in the driveway." I drove up that afternoon. The truck was gone. The front door of my house was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside for the first time as the undisputed owner. The place was a disaster. She hadn't just moved out. She left it in a state of pure spite. Trash overflowing, stains on the carpet, grime caked on every surface in the kitchen and bathrooms. She had taken her potted plants but left a mess that would take weeks to clean. But I didn't even care. Standing in the middle of that dusty, messy living room, I felt nothing but triumph. It was mine. The mess was my mess to clean. The broken railing was my railing to fix. The dream, which had been hijacked, was finally mine again. So, what happened with the HOA? The fallout was massive. After the eviction, the remaining board members resigned. A special election was held and a completely new board was voted into office. They immediately froze the HOA's accounts and, as part of our settlement, opened their books for a full, independent audit. The audit uncovered not just the payments to Malene, but also other financial issues. The new board is now working with law enforcement to see if criminal charges are warranted. Malene is not only out of my house, she's a pariah in the community she once ruled. This whole ordeal took 3 months and cost me thousands in legal fees, which the HOA, as a condition of our settlement, is required to pay back. It was one of the most stressful experiences of my life. However, it taught me a few valuable lessons. First, do your due diligence, but know that paper can't always protect you from people acting in bad faith. Second, when you're right, you have to fight. You can't let bullies intimidate you. And third, transparency is your best weapon. The moment I brought Malene's actions into the light, her power crumbled. Now I can finally start the work I dreamed of. The house needs a lot of love, but every time I pick up a hammer, I feel a sense of ownership deeper than any piece of paper could ever give me. I earned this house not just with money, but with a fight. Thanks for following this insane story. This was the battle for the house, but the real adventure, the renovation, is just beginning. If you want to see me turn this neglected, squatter-infested house into the mountain home it was meant to be, subscribe to the channel. And I have to ask, what would you have done? Ever had a nightmare with an HOA or a squatter? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to need some moral support as I start cleaning up this disaster. Thanks for watching.